back in, I think it was 2021, I was blown away by kind of the step function gain of that we saw from GPT-2 to GPT-3. Like the functionality was extraordinary. And so it wasn't that surprising then the year later when ChatGPT launched that we had these tech executives gushing about the fact that this was a moment that was comparable to the advent of the smartphone. And then a year later with the launch of GPT-4, we saw tech CEOs and VCs decreeing that like this moment was on par with the internet itself. And perhaps not to be outdone in just kind of sheer unbridled enthusiasm, Sundar, the CEO of Google, says, forget smartphones, forget the internet. AI is bigger than fire. And I think it's really important that everyone understands the fact that these tech executives, they really believe this. Bigger than fire is not hyperbole. And the way this manifests itself is like, this is a chart of the mega projects we've had as humans. And this is everything from nationwide rail networks to dams to the space program, like the Apollo moon landings. All of that capital pales in comparison to the annual spend on AI that Microsoft alone is budgeting for 2024 and beyond. And if you add Apple and Amazon, Google and Meta, this number is up to $150 billion. It's no surprise that NVIDIA got like $1 trillion boost on their market cap over the last 8 months. This is truly unprecedented. And even from the sidelines, I find this to be super exciting. But when you talk to people who are actually building the core underlying technology at these massive companies, they all seem to share a similar perspective. And it's a perspective that I've shared as well, that this push, this is our generation's Apollo program. And I've been super excited about this since I finished my doctorate in machine learning here at MIT back in 2005. I and Eric Horowitz, who was the president of AAAI at the time, is currently the chief scientific officer at Microsoft. He and I got together and we started Artificial Intelligence for Development with the idea of being able to essentially explore how AI could empower these leapfrog services in underserved communities globally, both here in the United States, but also in emerging markets. And it was a phenomenal group of researchers and an extraordinarily galvanizing mission. But the reality was it was about 10 years too early. And as I kind of found out, when I graduated from MIT, my mentor's advice, Marvin Minsky, told me to go where others aren't. And so after MIT, I moved to a small village on the coast of Kenya, where I worked in a local hospital. And what I did there was develop AI software for the community health workers to help them with things like data collection and, to some degree, rudimentary medical support. And at the time, I had been building these Bayesian inference models, and the reality was that they just weren't good enough for wide-scale deployment. And so it was, I spent several years of my life on this, and it didn't work. And so then I moved and started teaching computer science, machine learning, and app development at the University of Nairobi. And that's what was really interesting, was that suddenly there was a big demand to kind of take these classes and start building local developer communities. And soon I was teaching in Ethiopia, and then classes in Uganda, South Africa, Nigeria. There was a period of time where I had nearly a dozen simultaneous classes across sub-Saharan Africa. It was exhausting, and it clearly didn't scale. What's exciting now, if you fast forward to today, is that has gotten so much better in major verticals here. So this idea of being able to reason is extraordinary. AI, which I associate with the ability to create. And then there's this notion of being able to interact. And when you combine these abilities together, what happens is that software can, to a large extent, start replacing traditional services, critical services, services that require typically a very skilled worker. And it's exactly those types of workers in emerging markets that there's a massive scarcity of, right? There is a dearth of world-class educators. There is not enough world-class doctors or engineers. And so what AI has the potential to do is not replace the skilled workers in the developing world, but rather lift up everyone's skills, and I think at the same time radically impact the standard of care and the standard of education. So what's exciting is that this can happen right now. With the models today, they can be accessed by, there's 100,000 community healthcare workers in Kenya alone that have access to a smartphone that has internet access. And internet access then suddenly now gives you access to these extraordinarily sophisticated large language models that will solve virtually every problem that I was struggling with in Kenya at that little remote hospital 15 years ago. These new versions of AI models just would blow everything out of the water. And it is so exciting. And they don't have to be perfect, right? Today, over 20,000 people die every day from basically failures in the healthcare system in the developing world. As Reid Hoffman likes to say, every day that goes by where we don't have a world-class medical assistant in people's pockets can legitimately be measured in lives lost. Outside of healthcare, in terms of scaling education, again, another gaping hole where you just don't have world-class teachers. But what's really exciting is that, actually a few weeks ago, one of the first studies wrapped up in Ghana, where they provided essentially access to a really rudimentary chatbot. It's like running on GPT 3.5. It was essentially kind of a math tutor. And they gave 1,000 of these students access to that chatbot. And at the end of an 8-month trial, they got an increase on math scores. This, in the academic literature, in the education literature, that's comparable to replacing a mediocre teacher with a world-class teacher. That's the kind of lift that you see. And that is the reason why I went into AI 20 years ago. Like, being able to scale this type of thing is just so extraordinarily impactful. And from my perspective, when we look back at this period of time right now, like, this is the time I'm going to be telling you about. Like, we're on this precipice of this new world where I think AI really can make everything more equitable, more prosperous, more just for all. And if my grandkids in 30 years, my hope is if things go really well, they're going to agree with Sundar, right? That AI actually is indeed bigger than fire. Thank you.